Studies, and he joins us now via Skype. A very good evening to you, Derek. Thank you so much for joining us. What do you think emboldened the opposition to take to the streets?
Well, there's a crisis of expectation, really, in Harare. The opposition party had tried to build up a sense of momentum that they were going to win these elections. And certainly a lot of supporters and the party itself has become a victim of its own propaganda. They believed that they were going to win these elections. And with the results coming out indicating otherwise, there's immense disappointment and frustration. And the only explanation the opposition can give for the defeat is that there's been electoral malfeasance and rigging, and they have taken to the streets in anger because of this.
Now, Derek, you've been following the elections for quite a while now, and we've seen the MDC declaring the party a winner before the actual election started, during the elections, and now after the elections. Do you think that kind of statement was enough to incite violence, as we saw earlier on today?
Yes, these kind of statements have certainly been irresponsible from the opposition. They have said even before polling started that they would not accept a result which was anything other than a MDC alliance victory. This is in violation of the code of conduct. And MDC Alliance President Nelson Chamisa indicated again before polling started that if he wasn't declared the winner, that his supporters would take to the streets. They wouldn't go to the courts. They would take to the streets to ensure that they formed the next government. So these kind of statements are most unfortunate, and we see the results of that.
And the pledge from the Zimbabwe Defence Forces to stay clear of the polls, did the army keep its word?
Well, clearly not. The deployment of the military is entirely unconstitutional. It's a reflection of the militarization of the state in Zimbabwe since the events of November last year. Yes, and there was absolutely no basis for the deployment of the military. The police should be able to contain the couple of hundred demonstrators who were admittedly engaged in violent activity, but the police should be trained to contain the situation without calling in the military. The military cannot be deployed without the authority of the president, and it appears that the military took it upon themselves, probably without presidential authority, to go into the streets and to engage there was just indiscriminate use of firearms on the streets of Harare.
Should the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, I beg your pardon, announce the ZANU-PF and ultimately Emmerson Mnangagwa as the winner in these elections, would it be fair to say that the military did have a hand in that?
There's no evidence that the military has actually been involved in the electoral counting or the electoral result or anything like that. They have largely stood back during the electoral process. There has been some evidence of the military presence in the rural areas, but the extent of that and the effect of that on the elections is not really known. This is the first indication of the military intervention. The military were clearly nervous about statements that had been made by the opposition party before polling that if they were not declared the victors, that they would make the country ungovernable. And they've behaved in a rather trigger-happy fashion as a result of this, resulting in the tragic loss of life.
All parties had hoped that this will certainly be one of the most peaceful, if not the peaceful election. So what's the most urgent security issues threatening peace going forward?
Well, the military now is apparently deployed around the countryside. That needs to be legitimated through presidential authority. When Mnangagwa appeared, he did not indicate that he had authorized the deployment of the military. But I'm sure what we are going to see going forward is a security sector clampdown by both the police and the military until the situation calms. Obviously, the announcement of the presidential result, which is expected tomorrow, is a potential for further volatility and violence. and I have no doubt that the military and the police are going to be on high alert while we wait for that result and after the announcement of that result.
And we understand that Zimbabwe's police say they have invoked a strict security act. Do we know for sure what the measures are taken through this act?
Well, the reference there you saw Commissioner Charity Charamba making her statement. She indicated that the police had invoked Section 37 of the Public Order and Security Act, which authorized the involvement of the military. This is another symptom of the breakdown of the rule of law in Zimbabwe, because that provision of the Public Order and Security Act is unconstitutional and has been unconstitutional ever since the advent of the 2013 constitution in Zimbabwe.
Are we likely to go back to the 2007 bloody elections?
No, I don't think things will deteriorate to that level. I suspect that after 3 or 4 days, matters will have calmed down and the opposition will voice their grievances through more conventional channels.
And it's interesting that none of the election observers have come out to condemn the violence and the bloody elections in Zimbabwe.
Well, I think the statement from the UN was on point. The problem we have here is that the MDC itself is in violation of the Code of Conduct. They ought to be accepting the election results. They sign up to the Code of Conduct saying they will accept election results, and the Code of Conduct also requires them to attempt to stop their supporters from engaging in the kind of violence that we saw in Harare. But of course, that doesn't justify the heavy-handed response by the state to their demonstrations. There's no law which justifies the killing of these unfortunate young people on the streets of Harare. And Charity Charamba, rather than saying that they're going to be looking through the footage to find who is responsible for the demonstrations, should be looking through the footage to find out who is responsible for killing these people and charging them with murder, because I'm afraid that's exactly what these actions are.
All right, Derek, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. That is Derek Matyszak. He's a Harare-based senior researcher at the Institute for Security Studies, and he joined us via Skype.